Hello and welcome. I'm the Candyman and we're back with more Vigor. So I'd like to formally introduce a new series to the channel called Apoca-Tips, the series where we give you, the viewer, tips and tricks on how to better survive in post-war Norway. Now, if you have tips or tricks that you feel like could be useful for other Outlanders trying to survive, go ahead and leave a comment down below and you might see it featured. If you find this video helpful, go ahead, hit the like button. Also consider subscribing and you'll get better at surviving the apocalypse, I promise. Alright, so today's Apoca-Tip is on how to handle recoil. Now, whether you're a seasoned vet or a new player, one thing you'll notice about gunfights in Vigor is that there is a whole lot of weapon sway and recoil. So in today's video, I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to better handle your weapon. Because knowing how to is going to be the difference between hitting that kill shot or getting killed on your last shot. So without further ado, let's jump into the video. Tip number 1, use your sights. So for the majority of the time, you should be using the sight on your weapon. Now I get it, there's going to be times where doing so is going to be impractical, if not borderline impossible. Such as getting ambushed. You know, you're sitting in the middle of a house, and then somebody comes busting through the doorway, and you just have to hip fire, do a little spray and pray, hope your bullets hit the target. I get that. But most of the time, in order to get the best accuracy and be able to handle the recoil the best, you should be aiming down that sight. Not just aiming down the sight, but also aiming down in first person. Because by default, Vigor puts you in third person when you're aiming down the sight of your weapon. So just to make sure, if you don't know how to do it, make sure you're aiming and then click on the right stick. And you'll be able to see the sight of your weapon. So this, like I said, it helps with your accuracy because instead of having those white crosshairs, you're going to have the scope or sight on your weapon. And you'll be able to better control recoil as well because your weapon will be literally right in front of your face instead of, you know, the camera being behind the character and trying to control it that way. It really is a simple but helpful tool to get you started on the path of controlling your weapon. Tip number 2, rates of fire. So next up, we're going to talk a little bit about how important it is to understand the rate of fire on your weapon. So almost all the weapons, not all, but almost all the weapons have varying modes of fire on the weapon. So you're going to be able to choose from single shot, which is pretty straightforward. You pull the trigger once and one bullet comes out. You pull the trigger and hold the trigger, one bullet still comes out. Second option is burst. So burst is every time you pull the trigger, it's going to fire a couple of bullets. So instead of being that single shot, it's going to fire 2 to 3 bullets depending on the weapon. And then finally, automatic, where you're able to hold down the trigger, and as long as you do so, you're going to be firing away. Understanding each one of these modes is extremely important for recoil because the first mode, single shot, is going to be probably on most weapons the easiest to control the recoil because it's just one shot and then that's it. You don't have to worry about trying to handle the recoil on subsequent shots, especially if it's a bolt action weapon. Now the burst fire is a little bit different because you're going to pull the trigger once and those 3 shots are going to come out, or 2 shots depending on the weapon, like I said, and your weapon is going to be affected obviously. And then with automatic, you know, you pull the trigger and if you hold it down all the way, your gun's going to go sky high. So it's extremely important to probably, if you're newer, to start off with single shot. So that way you can kind of better get a grasp of how the weapon feels when it fires a shot. And then kind of slowly work your way up if you can. Like I said, not an option on every gun, but if you can do it, go ahead and try to do it. Tip number 3, get down. Another factor that influences weapon stabilization and recoil in the game is going to be your stance. So there's 3 different stances available to you in Vigor. That's going to be standing, crouching, and going prone. Now, each one of these has a benefit in terms of movement and weapon stabilization, but also has a con as well. It has its drawbacks. So first, standing. With standing, obviously, you're going to have the highest range of motion, right? You're going to be able to run, sprint, jump, whatever you want to do. But it's going to give you the highest amount of weapon sway and recoil because you're not anchored to the ground. You don't have a strong center of gravity, okay? Now, crouching is probably, well, not probably, it is the middle point between all three stances. So you're going to have just enough mobility to be able to move around in case your target's moving, but you're also going to get a good amount of weapon stabilization. And then finally, going prone. Now, once you're laying on the ground, you can't really move, right? You can't jump around easily. You can't run. You can't sprint. But since you are laying on the ground and you're anchored, you're going to have the best weapon stabilization, and it's going to have the least amount of recoil. So definitely go prone when you can to help reduce recoil. Tip number 4. Choose a weapon and stick to it. So this fourth tip is just a culmination of the previous 3. Now, if you feel like you are going into gunfights and with the recoil and the weapon sway, you're just not winning fights that you feel like you should, go ahead, take one weapon, and apply all these tips to them. And practice, 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 and practice some more. Practice makes perfect, or at least, you'll get close to it. So make sure to fire at different rates of fire. Make sure to shoot from different stances. So practice crouching and hip firing, crouching and aiming down the sight, going prone, using single rate of fire instead of automatic. Just mix and match everything that you possibly can so that way you're comfortable in any and every situation that you'll encounter on the battlefield.
All right, so we'll go ahead and wrap up the video here. Now, if you like the video, do me a favor. Hit the like button and consider subscribing as well. As always, I'm grateful for the support, and I'll catch you in the next one.